Welcome back to ABC of Storytelling 2.0. My name is Rituparna Ghosh, and every week I share easy to understand and simple to use storytelling tips. ABC of Storytelling 2.0 is a social learning experiment where I hope you use stories to power your business, your life, and your work. We are on the letter K, and today I have 3 of them for you, so let's begin. Imagine you begin telling a story, your listener leans in to listen, and suddenly, while you're in the middle of your story, your listener is swept by this urgent need to interrupt your story, to kidnap your limelight and get in there with his or her own story. And as your listener becomes the storyteller in that moment, you are pushed to becoming the listener who is waiting for your listener to finish his or her story so that you can continue yours. Does that sound familiar? Well, I know this happens to the best of us. Yes, this has happened to me many times. I have started telling a story and suddenly I'm interrupted by my friends, my family, who want to jump in and tell me their story. And really, to be very honest, me, the storyteller, has also felt this urge to get in the middle of somebody's narrative and share my story while I am the listener. Now, let me explain this to you. It's important that we understand why does this happen. You see, when we begin listening to a story, all the neurons in our head, they fire up and they start connecting with each other, recalling the moments and instances that parallel the story that we are listening to. So the moment you start telling about your first job, your first day at work, or where you grew up, or things like a story from your childhood, your listener will have similar experience in their mind as well, in their experience, in their life. And that's when their stories ignite, their stories come back, and there is this urge to get in and tell their stories. Because their brains have been busy gathering all the information of their own story, similar to yours. This happens many times when you tell a story which has a large shared experience. Now, we all want to tell stories that our listeners align with, that our listeners want to listen, because empathy is a very strong emotion. We want our listeners to agree with us. We want our listeners to get into our story and understand where we are coming from. Now, while we want to do that, it's also important that as the storyteller, you know that, hello, you can't take my story away. I want you to listen to mine because I'm going to listen to yours. And there are ways to do that. This is where your telling is important. While you're telling your story, you have to acknowledge that your listener has a parallel story or a parallel narrative running in their heads. And while a part of their brain is busy gathering their own story, which they wouldn't have thought of it until a moment ago, you want them to also stay connected with yours. So that you tell them that I know you're thinking about your own story at this moment and I want to listen to yours, but let me finish mine first. And you have to acknowledge that in your telling in some way or the other. You have to articulate that you are interested in your listener's story as much as they are or they should be in yours. Next time when you sit down to listen to a story, try and identify that urge. When and how does your brain tell you that I have a similar story and I want to tell it? Yes, if you observe yourself as a listener, you will also understand that your listener is also going to behave in the same way as you will. And that's the whole idea of understanding that yes, your story or your storytelling moment, that under that spotlight, that storytelling spotlight can be kidnapped and your story may become somebody else's story. There is a risk. You want that to happen, but there is always a risk. How do you handle that risk? Lies in the way you tell your story. A large part of my work involves kindling a love for stories and others. People like you who understand and appreciate the power of stories and storytelling, but are waiting to really try out this superpower. People who want to use stories and storytelling for a very strategic purpose, like branding, communication, selling, or influencing. Organizations where I work with managers, leaders, trainers in using stories and storytelling in everyday work and making it an organizational culture. My job, my aim, my mission is to kindle a curiosity, kindle a sense of discovery, kindle a sense of exploration, and then a love for stories and storytelling. Now, it's easy to convert individuals, but where there are teams and entire organization involved, there are certain steps that you need to take to create a storytelling culture bit by bit. If you are consuming ABC of Storytelling 2.0 at an individual level and want to know how can you use or how can you take storytelling to your organization, to your business, write to us at contact@yourstorybag.com. We may have something for you. Recently, a business leader approached us to help them write their organizational story. Now, this organization is in the business of food, and they have a rich legacy which is nearly 60 years long, or a little more than that. 3 generations of the family have shaped the organization to take it from its infancy to its stage today. This is a corporate which was born in a post-independent India, a newly formed India. And in all these years, it has really been an entrepreneurial journey which has started from a very small setup to be a global brand today. The leaders or the family which runs the business wants to document these stories before they are lost. Now imagine a story like this. Imagine an organization like this, which is 60 years of heritage, of legacy, the number of stories that there are. The stories that are told by its products, by the people, by the processes, by the impact, or in the history of a growing India, and how this one brand has also grown with India along the journey. The job of a storyteller, therefore, is to sift through the sea of stories and find the exact ones which tell the entire narrative bit by bit. It is also about making sense of the narrative which has been shaped by its people, by the processes, by the milestones. It is also about gathering the stories that are lost or that will be lost if they are not documented. Knowledge management through stories is all about documenting the legacy of the organization through its people, through its processes, and its milestones. It is about finding the right stakeholders who have shaped the organization through their practices, through their behavior, through their responses and choices that have shaped the organization. It is about understanding what works towards building that brand, what worked in a certain age, and what were the other things which impacted the growth of an organization in another era. It is about gathering this story, these heirlooms or these story heirlooms of an organization, and documenting them for future generations of employees so that they understand the legacy of the organization that they are working for. Capturing an organization's stories or capturing the collective knowledge of an organization is a massive task. There are very few organizations who do it well. But if you really want to know how you can tell your organization's story, no matter how old your organization is, whether even you are a startup or you are an organization that has been in business for 50 or 60 or 80 long years, yes, you can tell your story, even if you've not told it till now. There are ways you can gather your story and tell it to the world in multiple ways and create that whole knowledge of experience or the knowledge of stories of having shaped the world that you lived in bit by bit with every story. If you want to know a little bit more about how to use stories for knowledge management, write to us at contact@yourstorybag.com. We would love to have a new conversation. That's all I have time for this week on ABC of Storytelling 2.0. Storytelling is a social skill, and through this series, I'm trying to make learning the craft a social learning experiment. Come and join our community, come share your stories with other story practitioners, and take back various applications of the ABCs. Or if you want, you could also share your story on social media and tag me or write to me at contact@yourstorybag.com. I would love to play a small role in your role as a storyteller. Until next week, happy storytelling.